There are at least 100 billion galaxies in this universe, each of 100 billion stars. Each star illuminates an uncounted number of planets, each of which may support inconceivable forms of life. From most points of view, the green Earth is smaller than an electron. All this is happening within your mind. Can you sense that? That there's all of that presumably out there, and yet it's all within your mind. These are real experiences of selflessness.
Hey there, and welcome back to Jack Kornfield's Heart Wisdom podcast on the Be Here Now Network. I'm Ganesh, honored to open the door to episode 242, Disentangling Your Illusions. This is part 2 from last week's talk, heralding in from 4/23/1990, and dives a bit deeper down the rabbit hole of self and no self. This paradox that we seem to all live within, can't get out of, and if there's no self, might not actually even be in the first place. So, yeah, before I disentangle any more illusions for you, let's get to Jack. But before we get to Jack, we have 2 little bits of housekeeping. On June 17th, Jack will be hosting the Spirit Rock Monday Night Dharma Talk. This is an online gathering which Jack does monthly. It is a way for you to connect with satsang, get in a little guided meditation, and have a really nice Dharma Talk with Jack. It's a pay what you can online event, so no excuses. And then, on June 22nd, Jack will be back at Spirit Rock, on land and online, for the Awakened Heart, a daylong mindfulness and compassion retreat. This one did sell out, it looks like, for the on-land portion, but it will be streaming live, so you can head to the Jack Kornfield events page on jackkornfield.com to sign up for either of those. And this is a good time to plug the newsletter, because anyone signed up for the newsletter got an early peek at those events in the events box. Also, it keeps you up to date with Jack's new courses and fresh articles, meditations, Dharma talks, whatever Jack has coming down the pipeline. You can sign up for that at jackkornfield.com/newsletter. So there we go. I have disentangled the illusion of the intro to leave you in the mystical present moment with Jack Kornfield in episode 242 of Heart Wisdom, Disentangling Your Illusions. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you help others through the authenticity of your being, and may your heart be smiling. Namaste.
As our practice deepens, there is a process of opening to selflessness and to self both. And what we initially confront are 2 delusions that need to be undone or disentangled. The first is the delusion of a solid self. So we'll go back to that again for a moment. The Buddha said in the sutras, all is voidness. I go on alms round, I eat my food, I live in the forest, I wear my robes. It's all void and empty. We tend to see ourselves as separate and solid, to sense ourselves, to know ourselves, to feel ourselves. In this fixedness, there's a kind of glue, which is an image we hold of ourselves, beliefs, some view of ourself being a certain way and moving through time and space. What the Buddha discovered was that these processes of the 5 processes of body, feelings, memories, and perceptions, all the thoughts and reactions, and the consciousness which knows them have no ownership, are unpossessable. That it's not our eyes or ears or tongue or nose or body or mind. There is no one, no past, no future. And that there's just this open space of the present. Certain practices can be done in different yogic traditions and Buddhist traditions where you simply ask, who am I? Over and over again, who am I? Well, I'm not this body. Okay, I can get to that on a good day. I'm not these feelings. I'm not these thoughts. Well, I'm these plans. And you might answer over and over, and you don't have to do it for very long before you exhaust all that set of images of yourself. And then who am I becomes, this big open space that's nothing and everything. This mystical present in which all time is here and all possibilities are present. Right now, it's all here. All connected. There are at least 100 billion galaxies in this universe, each of 100 billion stars. Each star illuminates an uncounted number of planets, each of which may support inconceivable forms of life. From most points of view, the green earth is smaller than an electron. All this is happening within your mind. Can you sense that? That there's all of that presumably out there, and yet it's all within your mind. These are real experiences of selflessness. So one of the delusions is to undo the sense of solidity. And the more carefully we pay attention, the more it shows itself in all those ways of which I've spoken. The other delusion that's also important to know and honor in practice is the undoing or the untangling of the false or deficient sense of self. And this is where we hold a great deal of our suffering. We often hear, particularly the wounded, lonely, difficult parts of ourselves, hear the teachings of no self. And I've seen it often. People will come and say, yeah, that's me. I've experienced that a long time. Nothing has meaning. There's no self here. But that's not the no self of empty space that contains all things. That's the self of negative self-image, of deficiency. I'm nothing. I'm terrible. I'm a weak, shameful, ugly, unimportant person. And that happens to a lot of people in our culture. We are a culture that's lost the art and the deep ability to nurture human beings as children very well. And so there are many, many of us in this new there isn't even nuclear families anymore. There's half a nuclear family. The majority of kids in the school where I teach, we have a cooperative school for Caroline. I teach once or twice a month. All the parents take turns. Majority of the kids live with one parent or the other. I mean, it's gotten really sad. And so we don't even know, it's not handed down as it was in old cultures and villages, how to hold children, how to bond with them, how to get them to have a sense of self and well-being and wholeness. And all these people grow up, not all, but many, nuclear families, God, with senses of deficiency, or worse than that, of abuse, senses of meaninglessness. It happens for lots of us, for lots of men, even worse for women in this culture. The way it's been, men are supposed to at least grow up and do something, but there's a part of the way it's been handed down in a patriarchal society, which many women grow up and they feel that there isn't much meaningful for them to do, really. And so we come to be an adult in our adult costume, but we're really adult children in some way. And what functions in there is very low self-esteem and a deep sense of unworthiness, which is our sense of self. Anybody recognize that in this room? Oh, no self, that's me, right. And so there's this confusion of no self with negative self, with the inner critic, with how much we hate ourselves, with our unworthiness, with our disgust with this body. I don't know how many people I've seen in interviews or in therapy who hate being in a human body and hate their man's body, don't like being a man, or hate their women's body. To have a body with breasts and a vagina or a penis. Ugh, disgusting. It's true. It's terrifying or frightening to people. So when you start to practice, here it is, Jules Pfeiffer. He says, I grew up to have my father's looks, my father's speech patterns, my father's posture, my father's walk, my father's opinions, and my mother's contempt for my father. And in that is sorrow and grief and rage and shame that's very, very deep. So when we actually start to practice, we encounter what I like to call the Freudian layer. People get scared and think that's who they are. It's only a layer, but it's there, all right. It's that stuff. Now, if you teach just no self, you could say, well, that's not who you are. None of that's who you are. But what happens is, if you say no self to all that, then you run away to this realm of, well, there's no self. But as soon as you come back and have to meet another person or work in the world of form, the self that you put right back on again is this shameful or worthless or frightened or unworthy self. You understand? You can't just no self it away. It doesn't work. What you have to do is discover some new capacities of self as a man on this earth in a man's body, as a woman on this earth in a woman's body. Your true nature, your Buddha nature as a male or a female. And that's quite wonderful. But to do it, you can't no self it away. You have to go down right into that stuff with your attention. Into that stash of unworthiness that you don't tell anybody, but everybody else carries around like you. The first thing you have to do is pay attention and see it and hear it and be willing to listen to it. There's a beautiful poem by Wendell Berry about meditation where he says he goes out into the wilderness, into those silent places, and puts all of his work aside, just lets it rest like the cattle in the fields, all his tasks. And then what he is afraid of comes, and he listens to it, and it sings a song. And he says, it sings its song, and as it sings, it becomes less afraid of me, and I become less afraid of it. You understand that? It's a beautiful poem. The first step in this part about self is that we have to have or develop in ourselves this capacity to sit and let these things that we've been so frightened of come and tell their stories sometimes. And then as we listen, a second thing is required, which is a very deep forgiveness or compassion or loving kindness. They're really all the same words. That we touch that creature that has frightened us or we've been so frightened of it, that frightened, despicable child in there, or whatever it is. That we don't put anything out of our heart, that we take that too into our awareness with loving kindness. We listen to its story, we receive it as a creature of ours. And through accepting it and opening, we go through the middle of it and discover its opposite. This is a secret in working with oneself. If loneliness comes and it's very, very deep and you've run away for your whole life because you were abandoned when you were 1 or 3 or in past lives or God knows how many times, you don't even know, it's countless, but it comes and that's your identity. I'm a lonely person. And you let it tell its story and you touch it with compassionate attention. You hold it like a child with your caring. You don't put it out of your heart. And you sense into it loneliness at some point when it's given all the space it wants, turns into silence and aloneness, which is very different. Instead of being lonely, there's this sense of connectedness with everything. You are alone and connected. Its opposite shows itself. Or sometimes you find tremendous aggression and trying to be strong and overpower things, mostly because you're terrified, like everybody else. And you feel that pattern of this aggression and effort and trying to be strong that's happened over and over from the sense of deficiency. Well, maybe you'll do that. And first you let it tell its story. I'm going to be Superman. I'll get strong enough, or Supergirl, or whatever it is. And you hear all that. And you just listen to it till you're less afraid of it. And you touch it with compassion. And you let it open. And as it opens through its own emptiness, it opens and dissolves, and there comes instead a sense of a kind of groundedness or strength that's not that you're trying to overpower or overcome something, but just the strength of sitting here on your cushion on this earth. There's an inherent strength in being that you've been looking for all this time, and it has nothing to do with that old identity. It's been here all the time. Or you touch places of meaninglessness, and you pay attention and you accept that profound meaninglessness. It is meaningless on one level. And you feel the pain and the ache of that meaninglessness to its depth, to the center. You allow it with your attention. And then out of it is born this sense of wonder and beauty, creativity. In the interviews that we do, we often see these two difficult processes happening in people. And they're really the same process, they're just different aspects of it. Because both of them involve an opening or a shift of our identity. Through a deeper and deeper attention, there comes an opening to the formless, an ease, seeing that we possess nothing, that there's space, that it's ungraspable, it becomes silent. And people become more comfortable in that. They get afraid and they start to think and worry, and then they become a little easier with it. It's okay to feel this selflessness. Through deepening attention and careful listening and opening, there also comes a discovery in form. Both of these take a lot of respect and care. That all the old sorrows and all the old identities, the deficiency, all the negative stuff that we held is not who we are. And we start to see a shifting of identity or a shedding, a letting go. And there's a sense of sufficiency and purity and radiance and well-being and a kind of uniqueness about us that arises whenever those are abandoned and let go of. There's a coming together, a wedding of the universal and the personal. I had an experience at the end of a retreat one time. It was a long retreat. I'd done a lot of interviews. I was a bit tired, But it was a wonderful retreat. I was in a great space and I was happy for people. The last couple of days, there tend to be many, many interviews, and long ones, it's like the last things that people really need to talk about come up. And so there's a kind of intensity to those last days. And I was doing a lot of metta that retreat, and I felt a lot of compassion and love, connectedness with people. I went back home and I was feeling that. And I go, and I worked for a lot of years with a kind of breath process that's a sort of spiritually oriented therapy. I went and I was breathing, working with this person that I work with. Wonderful work. And I was describing the retreat and the state of my heart and this kind of compassion and sense of connectedness. And as I lay there and I just breathed, as a kind of light, all of a sudden, very deep inside my heart, it's as if something cracked open and a whole other door opened. And a different color came. Instead of this white color that was there, this very deep, beautiful red and gold came. And out of it, I sensed the love that I have for my daughter and my wife and my 3 brothers whom I love a lot, my parents, and the garden that we planted that year. And it was a shift. It was a very visible, tangible shift from a universal kind of love for all beings to the most personal, immediate. My 5-year-old girl, my wife, the things we planted in the garden, my home, my neighborhood. And it was a wonderful kind of love, really extraordinary. Sometimes we think in the beginning of spiritual practice, when we try to do it just with our mind, that it means removing ourselves from the world. And that's false. We might do that for a time, but that's not freedom. The freedom of the Buddha is to be able to enter any realm and any domain, to inhabit it all and bring to it the sense of emptiness. To heal the split of mind and body, of self and no self. We are called upon in our practice and our lives to bring respect and tenderness and full attention to self and no self alike, and to discover a very interesting thing, that they're not different, that form is emptiness, that self is selfless. You don't get this with your mind. If you didn't understand that, don't worry, it's not your mind that will help you. My teacher Nisargadatta, the old Bidi Baba, he used to say, the mind creates the abyss and the heart crosses it. He says, wisdom says that I am nothing, and love says that I am everything. Between these two, my life moves. There's a knowing that we are nothing and everything. Form is emptiness. There comes a deepening sense of emptiness that we don't possess, that it's tentative, that it's always changing. And yet within that, there comes a sense of wholeness and integrity and well-being, and a deepening capacity to love, to commit, to touch, to enter into relationship in a whole and wise and complete way from moment to moment in this changing world. Dogen, Zen Master Dogen, says true awareness is the same thing as intimacy. To be awakened is to be intimate with all things, is his phrase. Isn't that interesting? It's not to move away from it, to bring your attention and your heart and your body all together so fully that you are there being born again into each moment. This is a long work. It's a work of a lifetime for most of us. To love, to respect, to open to this body, this life, this earth. But you're here. I mean, you're not here in order to not be here. I mean, at least while you're in this body, you're here. You might as well learn. You might as well enter this dance. I think when I speak in these ways of a very inspiring teacher for me, His Holiness Karmapa who, like the Dalai Lama, is one of the heads of the Tibetan lineages. And he does this ceremony at one point, one of his great ceremonies, which is to put on this crown that he's had for the last 12 lifetimes and, 1,000 years of incarnations. And in placing this crown on his head, to manifest himself as the Bodhisattva of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of infinite mercy and compassion, which is usually pictured with 1,000 arms, each extending compassion. And the teachings are that whatever realm there arises, and there arises all these realms, men's bodies, women's bodies, babies, old people, all the realms of creatures, realms seen and unseen, there the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion arises and extends compassion in an inexhaustible way. And when you're with Karmapa, you sense that maybe this guy actually could do it, and this extraordinary quality. One of the things that's most extraordinary about him is that if you have the opportunity to speak with him and just sit in front of him, it's not that it's all just universal, but when you sit and you speak with him, it's as if he really cares about you. He really listens and pays attention, as if you are a very important person to him in his life. Isn't that a wonderful thing, to meet people who listen to you in that way? He just happens to do it in every moment for every being. That's where that intimacy, self and no self. How could a bodhisattva, how could we manifest in all these realms with compassion? Well, you're not going to do it with your negative self. That's clear, the sense of deficiency. That's not going to do it. But when that's let go of, when it's not trying to do it from some small sense of self, then it does itself. That's part of the joy of selflessness, is that as we become selfless, much greater forces of what life is move through us. Because it's the Dharma that moves all things and not us. And so the Bodhisattva enters every realm and the Dharma heals. It's actually real easy. Well, take some practice. When I was with Nisargadatta Maharaj, who was this Hindu guru and a teacher of Advaita Vedanta in the tradition of Ramana Maharshi, wonderful teacher, great sense of space and love both from him. One of the stories that I've told often but will repeat this evening happened at that time that a young man came to one of our daily meditations and dialogues. He would have dialogue with people, mostly asking you who you were. You come in, if he'd not seen you before, sit down in front of me. Where are you coming from? And you could answer whatever way you dared. I came from New York was the easy answer. There's no coming and going. I didn't come from anywhere. What? He would look at you. Do you really understand that? Anyway, one day, a young man came in, and he asked a couple of spiritual questions, and then he left. Got a couple answers, disappeared, didn't return again. Seemed to be wandering around India doing other things. And someone said, Maharaj, what's going to happen to this guy? He didn't come, and doesn't have the kind of genuineness and steadfastness and ardor that it seems practice takes. Is there any hope for him? And Nisargadatta laughed. He said, hope for him? He said, it's too late, too late. And what do you mean it's too late? He said, well, just the fact that this man walked up the steps to this apartment and came in here and asked those questions about spiritual life or whatever means that that part of him who knows who he really is has started to wake up. And even if he goes out and does 1,000 difficult and different things where he forgets it, that started to awaken, and it's too late for him to. Maybe not even in this lifetime, but because it started to awaken, sooner or later, he too will come back to know what he really is or who he truly is. And so T.S. Eliot ends his quartets, the end of his life of poetry, with the lines from Julian of Norwich, where it says, "And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." It's her line. It's a very mysterious thing to be alive as a human being. And to sit on a retreat and not be so busy is to be able to listen to that mystery. We ask you to stay with it, moment to moment, not to distract yourselves so much. We try to encourage you when the pains and the small self-images and the old ways you've held have come, to meet that with awareness and compassion and let that move through you as it needs to, so you can open to even deeper senses of yourself. And those deeper senses of yourself are also deeper senses of no self. And that's the best I can do tonight. Thank you. Let's sit for a moment. I'm left with a little concern after this talk that somehow it might be interpreted that you have to rush around and get body work and therapy and fix your old negative self-images and then do some questioning of who am I and kind of do it consciously in all these pieces. Fortunately, it knows how to do it itself. All that you need to do is to keep coming back to the present, and what needs to open in you will. You can really trust that. What needs to open in the feeling body, in the physical body, in the mind, the things that are held. So your work is very simple. It's to become present over and over and make the space that allows that without possessing all those different identities until the space shows itself. And to bring enough intimacy and tenderness and compassion so that you can enter fully each of those moments, to really connect with each as it opens. That's all. It will do it just fine. All you have to do is be here for it.